Hey, do you know how to calculate the date of Easter? If you answered yes to that question, you are either a huge outlier or just a huge regular liar, because nobody knows how to calculate the date of Easter. It's this brutally complicated thing. But what I've discovered is that we should not feel bad about not knowing the answer to that question, because it's hard. It's way more complex than figuring out some stuff about the sun and the moon. This is an historical, theological, religious, political question that has so many moving parts that I don't even know if I can get to them all in this video. But I'm going to do my best to explain how we calculate the date of Easter. The first Easter happens around 30 AD, and Easter isn't even really the right term here because that name comes way, way down the road. But Christians literally believe that Jesus physically rose from the dead on this day, and that is kind of the defining moment for all of Christianity. I mean, everything hinges on that. If he didn't, well, then probably nothing he said is true, and if he did, maybe everything he said is true. So even Paul, in the Bible, in his letter to the Corinthians, says that if Christ hasn't been raised, everything we're preaching and your faith is completely in vain. So Christians are going to cherish this. They're going to want to commemorate that. And apparently they were, because by 120 AD, which is like 100 years after the resurrection, we see records of controversies amongst Christians from various parts of the Mediterranean world. And they're trying to figure out how to go from celebrating Easter on a bunch of different days to calculating it the same way to have unity in the church. Well, this doesn't get a lot of steam, and it isn't until the Council of Nicaea in the early 4th century where this gets addressed, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. Here's why it's tricky. Christianity and Judaism were kind of the same thing right at first. And so the resurrection and the crucifixion happened right in the same zip code, the same time of year as the Passover, a Jewish holiday, a very important one. And so those Christians who were most still connected to their Jewish neighbors and Jewish culture and the Jewish calendar really wanted to see that celebration be decided in terms of its date based on where the Passover fell. Well, the tricky thing about the Passover is that it's dated with a lunisolar calendar that the Jews use. So it's a very complex, unusual calendar that the rest of the world wasn't using. The rest of the world was on the Julian calendar, which was basically a solar calendar and a forerunner of the calendar we use today, which I'll get to in a minute. So at the Council of Nicaea, they decide that Easter will be set on the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the vernal equinox, and always after the Passover. If that seems really complex, well, then you understand how many factors the church was trying to sort through to arrive at peace and something predictable that people could actually count on so they could have unity. This was a tough situation they already found themselves in. Fast forward all the way to the 11th century AD, and this thing really gets into meltdown mode. People are passionate and angry, and the Eastern Church starts to feel like the Western Church is going their own way with Easter, and they feel great disunity over the thing. Fast forward a little more to the 1500s, and Pope Gregory initiates a series of reforms to the Julian calendar that come to be known as the Gregorian calendar. This is the one that we're on now. That calculates leap years a little bit differently, and so as a result, now we're even further afield from how the Eastern Church calculates it. And the Western Church isn't really tied to the whole Passover thing anymore at all. Well, you move forward, and there were several attempts, especially in the last 100 years, to get everybody together, political governing bodies, religious bodies, to say, hey, can we just circle a date? But ultimately, this is so rooted in theology and now a minimum of 3 really fairly different calendars that it's just not going to work. So if this wasn't confusing enough already, the Eastern Church is calculating that full moon based on the meridian near Jerusalem, and they eventually came up with a 19-year cycle for the evolution and rotation of that moon to figure out when those dates were going to occur. Plus, they're affected by being on the Julian calendar as it pertains to Easter. That's a ton of variables. The Western Church is still aware of the aspect of Passover, but they calculate which moon is that specific ritual moon that Easter has to come after differently than the Eastern Church, and they are on an 84-year projected cycle of moons to figure out where their Easters are going to land. I get it. On the one hand, we can say, this is what drives me crazy about religion. There's just always something to fight about. And now we're fighting about dates, and I don't want to know 2,000 years of history about stuff like this. But on the other hand, I think there's something kind of cool here. I guess this kind of tension is just the cost of doing business when you have a religion blow up the way Christianity did. Most things like this are little and regional, and you're not going to have any disagreements about how to render dates. I mean, everybody within a culture pretty much agrees on that. But Christianity went so viral so fast that this became part of the story of the religion, and it still is all the way to this day. So on the one hand, it's a vestigial reminder that Christians can fight about silly things, but it's also a vestigial reminder that Christianity has transcended all cultures and really gone global in a way that's pretty unique among all religions. I thought it was fun to think about it. If you don't have your brain wrapped around it yet, well, you can join the club. Either way, enjoy Easter whenever that happens to be for you. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. We'll see you soon.